Today I'll be talking to you guys about Cesar Chavez. He was a civil rights activist that fought for migrant field workers and their rights. And the reason I chose him was because this past December, I was in a conversation with two of my coworkers, and one of them was going on a rant. She was upset that we only get one day off for Christmas. We don't get an extra day for Christmas Eve. And she's like, oh, why do we only get one day off? Why don't they give us Christmas Eve? Schools get Christmas Eve. Everybody gets Christmas Eve. I would trade Cesar Chavez Day for Christmas Eve. And in my head, I'm like, crap, I don't know anything about Cesar Chavez, but he's Mexican and I'm Mexican. I should know something. I should defend him. And all I came up with was like, well, that's because you didn't have to struggle like they did. That wasn't your fight. And we just kind of laughed it off and left it at that. But I thought, crap, I don't know anything. I should know something. So when you gave this assignment, it was like a week before Cesar Chavez Day, March 31st. And I'm like, oh, well, there I go. I have a chance to learn something. So the information I'll give to you today, I took from the United Farm Workers website and then the textbook for my sociology class called Racial and Ethnic Groups. So I'll talk about his early life, his work with the United Farm Workers, and then some difficulties and successes that he had with that. So he was born in Yuma, Arizona in 1927. He learned about injustice early on in life. That was because the home where he was born in and that he grew up in was basically taken from his family from dishonest Anglos, which at the term everything was racially charged, and so that was just a term for like a white person that didn't speak Spanish. And basically, his dad entered into an agreement with the guy. If he would clear 80 acres of land, the dad would give him the deed to 40 of the acres, but the guy broke the agreement and sold it to another guy. And Cesar's dad went to an attorney, and the attorney just advised him, we'll just borrow the money and buy the land. And so that's what he did, but he wasn't able to pay the interest on the loan. And so the attorney went and bought the land and sold it back to the first guy that bought it in the first place. So that was something that he carried with him. They later moved to California, first in Oxnard, San Jose, Delano, and cities all throughout the state because his dad was a migrant farm worker. Cesar didn't like school because everything was still segregated back then. He would hear a lot of racial slurs, and also Spanish wasn't allowed at school, and that was his language at home. He didn't speak English well, so he'd always get smacked on the knuckles with a ruler for speaking Spanish. Another reason is because they moved around a lot. He went to over 30 different schools throughout his childhood, and he only made it to 8th grade because at that time his dad was involved in an accident, and he just basically assumed his role as the worker, and he didn't want his mom to work, so he became a migrant farm worker. Later on, he ended up joining the Navy. He served for 2 years, and then got married, and it was as he aged that he grew a passion for education. This led to the United Farm Workers movement. He founded it along with a woman named Dolores Huerta in 1962, and it was actually called National Farm Workers Association at the time. They wanted state recognition and collective bargaining agreements. They just wanted the state and federal government to allow farm workers to organize into a union and allow collective bargaining agreements because they wanted better pay, safe working conditions, and just for people to know the importance of farm workers. According to Schaefer, the author of my textbook, California agriculture farm workers were getting paid less than $2 an hour in the mid-1960s. So the way they sought to get the things they wanted was by the use of boycotts, picketing, and strikes. And they started with the Delano grape strike. In September of 1965, it was actually Filipino Americans that initiated it because they were getting the same thing, poor pay, poor working conditions. So just in the middle of a workday on grape farms is where they worked, they just up and walked out, and that was pretty much it. And they reached out to Cesar and his union for assistance, and the two groups merged together and they formed the United Farm Workers, and they initiated the boycott of table and wine grapes in stores. That led to the 340-mile march in 1966 from Delano to Sacramento. It was what Cesar called militant nonviolence, so it was just a group of people moving from city to city walking with their picket signs and their chants and just talking to people letting them know the struggles of the farm workers, like they got paid scraps, they didn't have toilets, they didn't get breaks, and just urging them to join their boycott and not buy the grapes in stores. A couple of years into the strike, nothing had happened, and members were getting frustrated, and they were wanting to get violent and use force because they felt that was the only thing that would make something happen. So Cesar took it upon himself to do a fast, which is you don't eat anything, you just drink water and that's it. And so he did 3 throughout his life. The first one in 1968, and it was to demonstrate his commitment to nonviolence. He wanted to show the other workers, like, we don't have to get crazy, we don't have to fight. And it was actually successful. Him doing the fast got national attention, and the grape strike was successful, and they were able to get grape growers to sign their union contracts. So the United Farm Workers did have difficulties. They didn't have money to basically pay for the organizing. They had what was in their pockets, and they didn't have money to live on pretty much when they were on strike. They just relied on what people were giving to them. The laborers were replaceable. There was always, like, the growers had a limitless supply of Mexican laborers to always replace them, so they didn't care that these other ones really left on strike. And then they always received opposition from, like, agribusiness and lawmakers. And the people that owned these agriculture companies had the money, they had the power to keep lawmakers on their side. Although they faced the difficulties, they did have some successes. They brought awareness to state and federal government of the exploitation, pretty much, of migrant farm workers. They also helped to instill a sense of power and self-worth into the workers, so that it made it more difficult for the workers to be abused in the future, as they had been so in the past. And then working conditions improved. They did get protection and benefits. So I want to read you this quote Cesar Chavez made in one of his speeches to the people. Once social change begins, it cannot be reversed. You cannot uneducate the person that has learned to read. You cannot humiliate the person who feels pride, and you cannot oppress the people who are not afraid anymore. And so that was it for Cesar Chavez. The information that I learned from him about his life, about his movement with the United Farm Workers, some of the hardships he faced in life and with the union, and the successes he had, it was all new knowledge for me, and hopefully it's a little bit of knowledge you guys can all take with you. And if you're ever in a situation like I was, or if this December comes around and my coworker goes on the same rant, at least this time I'll have some knowledge and I can make some claims and back it up pretty much. And that's it.